One more time. "1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions." And there you go with the crack of the bat. We are back with another episode of Detroit, City of Champions. Jamie flying solo. What I'm going to ask you to do right now, we appreciate everybody who joins us on this journey through these amazing stories. And I ask that you do something right now is just simply like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those podcast things and all those podcast places. We truly, genuinely appreciate it, the time you spend with us. And if you've enjoyed it, share it with a friend. That's all Charles and I ask you to do. And tonight, though, talking about stories, and we did, we'll link them down in the description. We did the whole series on Joe Louis, which is interesting because Joe Louis, all the champions in 1935, right? The Lions, the Tigers, the Red Wings all won their first championships, plus 30 other champions, all in Detroit, all in 35, and Joe Louis wasn't one. And we go through that whole story, but we did contend and we did argue that Joe Louis had the greatest season of any individual athlete ever, bar none. And I think we made that case pretty decisively. And Joe Louis was a very multifaceted individual, and yet he was a boxer. And he was very single-minded and single focused. And Johnny Smith and Randy Roberts were diving into the simplicity, complexity of the man and their book, The Fight of His Life, Joe Louis, Battle for Freedom During World War II. And we got some interesting stuff to share, and we're going to bring on the author of that book, Randy Roberts. Randy, welcome to Detroit, City of Champions.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. 35 was a great year for Louis. I mean, he beat Primo Canera in 35. He beat Max Baer in 35.
Oh, yeah.
Two world champions in 35.
Oh, yeah. But it
Jack
wasn't
Sharkey, I think, was 35.
The championship. I mean, his career, that's the year his career bolstered and grew. And yeah, he did decidedly have the best season of any individual athlete ever, but it wasn't for the championship.
No.
Darn it, Max Baer, you goofball.
Yeah.
you Cinderella man losing goofball. Yeah. So, but Randy, before we get into this, tell me about your childhood.
My childhood?
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about you.
I was born in the Pittsburgh area.
Oh, okay. Right on.
A lot like Detroit.
Yeah.
And, became interested in boxing at a very young age, mostly interested in the history of boxing, more interested in the history of boxing than the sport, than actually boxing. And I became interested in, then I went to college and did my graduate work, PhD work at LSU, which was a good time if you like college football. And since then, since 1988, I've been teaching at Purdue University. Mostly courses on World War II and sport history. All
right. And so what was Johnny Smith? How did you guys hook up? And what was the precipice for diving into this book?
Johnny and I, that's our fourth book together. Initially, we were, Johnny was one of my PhD students. But he's not a student anymore. He's an accomplished author. And we did, our first book we did was on Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, which was a good book to do. Then we did one on World War I and some Babe Ruth and some other characters in World War I, and also one on Mickey Mantle. That's our fourth book.
Oh, Joe Mickey. Louis. That's not a problematic individual at all there.
No, nothing problematic about the Mick.
Yikes. Sometimes people don't know all the history. And that's why professors of history are important to shed the light.
Sometimes with Mickey Mantle, it's best to not know the full story.
And it's like today, there's so many people, like, you throw out, like, Bill Cosby and Puff Daddy, and it's R. Kelly is I DJ stuff too. And it's like, do you play the music, or like I teach a broadcast class in high school, do you not show Bill Cosby? Cause that was like the pivotal black comedy changing things. So, where do you separate the art and the artist? Again, with somebody like Mickey Mantle, I mean, sometimes you got to peel those layers back and tell the full story, but does that negate everything else? Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Mickey was quite in the R. Kelly category.
No, but Pete Rose, right? Pete Rose, should he be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, Pete Rose was another problematic. Is he got a Pete Rose book on the horizon?
No, I don't, but I could tell you a cool story about Pete Rose.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. A friend of mine graduated from Yale, and he has a PhD, his PhD when he graduated, and he had Pete Rose sign it at one of the signings. I don't know, $100, whatever Pete Rose.
He signed his PhD?
Yeah, signed his PhD. And now also signing that PhD was the president of the Yale at the time.
All right.
Bart Giamatti.
Mm.
So he's got Bart Giamatti and Pete Rose signed the same document.
Oh boy. That's very interesting. All right, but we're talking about Joe Louis in your book, The Fight of His Life. It's interesting about Joe. And there was like how I was name dropping earlier before we went live, and JoJo, his son, Joe Louis Barrow Jr. the third, right? Because he named all his he named all his kids Joe Louis. So JoJo was in town launching Joe Louis Southern Kitchen, and he brought us down for the grand opening of that, JoJo there. And it was fun. But they had also, prior to that, and how I connected with JoJo was that I do another podcast, the Man Cave Happy Hour, which is all about bourbons, whiskeys, cocktails, spirits. And like right before COVID, right during COVID, they launched Joe Louis Bourbon. Right. So the family is very, 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 very tight with the Joe Louis name, and they don't let just anybody do anything. And so they did the Joe Louis Bourbon, and they were very, very careful about everything and the packaging. And they did this really cool thing. And in the background, so you had the label on the front and you had your label on the back, and the back of the label on the back they wanted a picture of like, up front on the label is Joe. And then in the background, they had like a crowd from one of his fights, but most of the fights were fairly segregated. So it was either all white folk or all black folk in most of the pictures, because it was pretty segregated. And the only fights that were like really not segregated were the ones during World War II and the fights that he did and the exhibitions that he did, because all the servicemen were just servicemen and they were all just there together. And so that's finally how they settled on the picture for the back, is because, it was a mixed crowd. They wanted a diverse crowd. And it was really hard to find a photo of a diverse crowd. And so that's what you're talking about. So walk me through the book. What are people, what's the story that you tell about Joe in the fight of his life?
The story we tell is one that really hadn't been told to the extent that we did. And it was about Joe Louis in World War II. It's about Joe Louis finding his voice politically and opposing Jim Crow and opposing segregation in the United States Army, but at the same time acting as a symbol of unity in America.
So the sources that you went to, who were you able to talk to about this?
Well, there's not many people left around to talk to about Joe Louis.
Yeah, there's not many World War II guys left for sure.
We talked to his son, who was born in World War II.
Right, the older son. Yeah,
but he didn't have much memories of his father at an early age. He did at a later age. But what we did is, we went through tons of newspaper files, just thousands of different newspaper articles. Government documents, Department of the Army documents, Department of State documents, followed him overseas in his tours of England and Italy mostly, and just went on to the Army bases with him, where he faced discrimination, and what he did for the government, what he did for America, as a symbol of democracy and republicanism, and during World War II. Of course, he became famous. His most famous fight was in 1938, June 22nd, 1938, when he fought Max Schmeling,
right,
the Nazi hero, knocked him out in one round. So after that, Joe Louis was a natural to represent America in its fight against Nazism.
So what is one of the interesting tidbits? What's one of the interesting stories in here that you uncovered in your research? What's something that is going to surprise me as I get into this?
Well, there's a number of stories. An interesting one takes place at Camp Seibert in Alabama, where Joe Louis was going to go into town with Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson, the great fighter, was a friend of Joe Louis and was on Joe Louis's boxing troupe that he took around to various bases. And they were going to go into town, and there was only one bus for black soldiers and two for white soldiers. Mm-hmm. And they were waiting a long time, and they went over and to the white side to call a taxi. The taxi was on the white side. So they called a taxi and then sat down to wait. And MP came up to Joe Louis and said, you can't sit here. You're in a white section. And Joe Louis said, this is a segregated base. I can sit here. No, you can't. And before you know it, they were wrestling around. Joe Louis was taken to the MP. It was taken to the prison, not prison, but kind of a local jail. Just kind of didn't put him in jail. Was sent to see the commanding officer, and it became But Joe Louis held his ground. He said, "No, this is. We may not have a segregated army, but the bases are segregated. That I can go on whatever bus I want. I don't have to follow the Jim Crow laws."
Right. Wow. I did that story. I had not heard before. So,
and also segregated bases. The bases were not segregated overseas,
right?
But there was de facto segregation. So where black soldiers would go to white, say, bars, the white officer would say, "No, you're not allowed here." Or if they allowed black soldiers into it, the bars were discontinued for all white soldiers. So he faced terrible discrimination overseas as well.
Wow. So what do you think? Because you said you're an advocate of boxing history. So now am I getting the name right? Jack Johnson, right?
Yes.
So what do you think the role, because Jack Johnson was kind of a very flamboyant, very outgoing, and that was like the 20s and earlier, right?
Teens.
In the teens, yeah. So and his behavior, even was shocking for the racial divide at the time. What do you think Jack Johnson's existence and his behavior impacted Joe and his ability to be a boxer?
Jack Johnson was his own man, lived a fast life. There's the story that Jack Johnson was going through some section of the Jim Crow South, and he always went too fast. He was driving fast, and he was stopped by a white sheriff, and the white sheriff said, you were exceeding the speed limit, boy." He said, "Yeah, I suppose I was." And he said, "Well, it's going to cost you." And Jack Johnson said, "How much?" And the sheriff said, $50. And Jack Johnson pulled a big roll out of his pocket and peeled off $100 bill and gave it to him. And the cop said, "I can't change a $100 bill." And Jack Johnson said, "Keep the change. I'm coming back the same way as I went through." But that was Jack Johnson.
Sure,
Jack Johnson lived a fast life. He did what he wanted. He married white women. Joe Louis was consciously developed into the anti-Jack Johnson. Right. America, after Jack Johnson lost the title, it won't be till Joe Louis until another black man gets a chance to fight for the title. So right. Jack Johnson became the antithesis of Joe Louis. Joe Louis's manager, particularly John Roxbury, made sure that Joe Louis never was seen in the company of white women, that he was always soft-spoken, that he was not outspoken, that he did not depart opponents. Everything that Johnson did, Louis didn't do.
Right. So and that's the thing. So it made it even more of a challenge for Joe, I believe, to get his leg up and do the amazing things that he did. It just facing those challenges ahead of time. So through the 30s and the 40s, this book kind of focuses on that time frame.
Yes, from the late 30s till the early 50s.
All right, and so yeah, so Joe is just after that, right? I wanted to talk about what came after boxing and after his service. Did you dive into that at all? Have you? I mean, not necessarily for the book, but the movements and especially into professional golf.
Yeah, we deal with that in the book.
Okay, good.
Excuse me. I'd written another book on Joe Louis as well, so I kind of covered the full range. In professional golf in 1952, he was invited to a play in a San Diego Open, under the auspices of the PGA. Although he was an amateur, he was invited to play in it. And when a guy by the name of Horton came down, who was the head of the PGA, said, "No, you can't play." And Joe Louis called all of his friends in the media, Walter Winchell, Jimmy Cannon, people that knew Joe well, and they taught. And Joe Louis said, "Look, I was part of the fight against Hitler. Okay, I don't want more Hitlerism in the United States." And Winchell and Cannon and the others said the same thing. And so an exemption was made for Joe Louis to kind of break the color barrier in the PGA by playing in the San Diego Open as an amateur.
Right. So, and then that was kind of breaking the color barrier in professional golf. He's kind of credited for breaking that barrier.
Yes.
From what I understand, it was that and it all ties in with, another breaking the barrier with Jackie Robinson, right?
Right. And Joe Louis helped Jackie Robinson get into officer candidate school in World War II. They became very close friends in World War II, Jackie Robinson and Joe Louis.
Do you have any stories in here about the two of them in the book as well, and their connection?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. As a matter of fact, towards the end, after he integrated baseball, Jackie Robinson said, "I could not have integrated baseball without Joe Louis."
That's
Joe
true.
Louis was his model, and they were both at Fort Riley, Kansas, together.
So, was there a military leader that was instrumental in helping Joe while he was in the military? Who was his main liaison, or not really liaison, but person that he worked with?
He worked a lot with a guy out of Chicago named Truman Gibson, who was a special assistant for Negro affairs, they called it at the time, for the United States Army. And so Truman Gibson, who was black, worked with Joe Louis. And when Joe would see something was completely out of range, that it was just not right, he would oftentimes call Truman Gibson, and sometimes Truman Gibson could cure the problem. Truman Gibson also was instrumental in getting Jackie Robinson into officer candidate school at Fort Riley.
Right on. All right. So what's next for you, right? You said you wrote another book about Joe. What did the other book about Joe encapsulate?
Well, it concentrated, although it dealt a little in World War II, it concentrated on his main career, which was in the 1930s, with Schmeling and through his tax problems and just kind of a more full biography.
Right. So the fights during World War II, these were more exhibition fights. They weren't, were they, what were the caliber of the things that Joe was doing during his enlistment?
Well, he fought 2 fights for the United States Navy and Army. He fought a fight for the Navy Relief Fund in 1942, and then he fought one for the Army Relief Fund. So, and he donated his entire purse. I mean, who's ever heard of that? Where a heavyweight champion fights, defends his title, risks his title, and gives his entire purse to the United States Army or the United States Navy. So he fought those. Then he had a boxing troupe that traveled hundreds of places in the United States and Europe. And there he just put on exhibitions. He just fought with a sparring partner.
Okay.
Guy by the name of Nicholson. I can't imagine what Nicholson's life was like, fighting Joe Louis and dying night after night after night. After a while, he had to take some time off, because, one thing about boxing, when you box, you're bound to get hit in the face. Okay. Yep. You're going to get hit multiple times. And poor Nicholson, he long suffering. And Sugar Ray Robinson was in that, like I said, in that troupe too.
Wow. All right. That it's quite the adventure that he had. It's very interesting. And then his work there with in World War II and all the work that he did and the money that he helped raise and the awareness that he raised, and then the barriers he broke down, ultimately led to him being able to be buried. Well, him being buried in Arlington, right? So
right, Ronald Reagan gave him the exemption to be buried in Arlington.
Yeah. So who gets to be buried in? Do you know the story on that? Who gets to be buried there and why he had what exemption they had to give him?
Well, it's a serviceman, but usually you won't bury a sergeant there,
right?
But Ronald Reagan was a great admirer. As a matter of fact, there was a movie. This is the Army was made. It was the most popular movie, the most widely seen movie in World War II. And Joe Louis played an instrumental role in it, and so did the main character was Ronald Reagan. So they were in the same film together.
Oh my goodness! All right, I just all the time it's talk about Reagan. He was in the fraternity I was in, but just Back to the Future. Who was the president? Ronald Reagan, the actor.
Yeah.
It's it's my favorite bit. All right, excellent. So this the book is out, right? It came out mid-October. It's out. Where can people find it?
Well, they can find it in most bookstores, or at least I hope they can find it in most bookstores now. But also, of course, Amazon.com and any of the places online that you buy books.
All right. So who is the book for? Do you need to be a boxing fan? Do you need to be a Joe Louis fan? Who is this book for?
I think it's for a person that likes boxing, but also likes politics, that's interested in World War II. To me, I teach World War II. It's my favorite class to teach. And if you're interested in kind of the combination of sports and World War II, this is a book for you. And also kind of a person with a tremendous amount of dignity that does a great deal for America during the war, and a person that some people look at as Joe Louis didn't say anything. If you're raised like I was in the 1960s, that was the age of Muhammad Ali, who was a very different character than Joe Louis, but each in their own way made terrific strides for their own people.
So, that's what I started out with, that Joe was a very complex and multifaceted person, and yet very simple. He was just a dude that wanted to box and excel in boxing, right? And to the fact that he was black was just like, okay, I'm just a boxer and I want to fight, right? And I want to do well. And all those other things, I think, came to him. I don't think he went actively looking for it so much as just, him as a person pushed through it, and it happened for him.
Right.
He was so hard at his craft.
Yeah, and World War II is where he finds his political voice, where he stands up. He stands up for causes. He supports America, but he supports his own people. I mean, he has to be both an American and an African American,
Right.
which was a pretty hard line to walk in in World War II, because the Army was segregated. We had Stimson, the Secretary of War, at the very beginning said the Army we will not fight with an integrated Army.
Amazing. Amazing. So Detroit has some tributes to Joe. There's right downtown Detroit on the main drag there on Jefferson. It's the big fist. You see it all the time, and whenever there's a major sporting event in the TV, they do cutaways to that. But there's a brand new there's a thing called the DeQuinder Cut, and there's like some rail lines that are defunct, and they turned them into pathways in the city, green spaces, and they're very, very cool. And in one of them, they were doing a tribute to Joe because we had a whole arena, Joe Louis Arena, where our Red Wings used to play, and they and concerts would happen in there. They tore it down, right? They got rid of Joe Louis Arena. Now it's like condos or something. But it was Joe Louis Arena forever, and so they were looking to do another tribute to Joe because the JLA went away. And it's very cool. In the DeQuinder Cut, they put up a statue for Joe, but this statue depicts him as a golfer.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Yeah,
it's an interesting story. You talked about Joe Louis bourbon.
Yes.
There in World War in the 30s, 40s, there was a Joe Louis punch that was named after him. And when he was out kind of trying to get people to buy it, someone asked him, a reporter asked him, Joe, what's your favorite drink? And they thought he'd say Joe Louis punch. And Joe Louis said, I'm a Coca-Cola man myself.
Joe, you don't know anything about marketing, do you? Wide open, spike it over the net. Oh my God. Yeah. So, but Joe Louis bourbon, yes, he did in his lifetime have a Joe Louis bourbon. It just came and went, and it didn't really go anywhere. And then they did a relaunch a couple years ago, and that bottle with the verse crowd in the background is one of my favorite bottles on the shelf. I was like, sad to see that one go when I emptied it out. Have you seen the Joe Louis bourbon?
I haven't, but I will. I would look forward to drinking a glass.
Yeah. Very corn forward. It's like 70-80% corn mash.
Where's it made? Is it made down in Kentucky or Tennessee?
Tennessee, but it's a part of Tennessee that's it's actually before state lines were redrawn. It was actually the part of Tennessee, like right in the part there that was Kentucky at one point. So it's that limestone water, that nice water. It's a fair bourbon. It's nice. It's a little hard to find. I think it might be going away again. But I'm glad I got one on the shelf because it's a very cool package, and it's a very cool bottle.
Well, I certainly want to get one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Randy, I appreciate. I know we played a little phone tag, basically trying to connect and get on here. I'm glad we had a minute to talk about your book, and then because we are just massive fans of Joe. So I invite people. Is there a website that people can go to? Do you guys have a website for your books, or just Amazon and search your name and your titles come up?
I say Amazon.
All right. So you just Randy Roberts and that Joe Louis boxing books and all your other books. How many books do you have?
Oh, I don't know, about 30.
Holy smokes. Publisher perish, right?
I'm getting old.
All right. So Randy, appreciate the time this evening. And anything else we need to add? Anything? Did I miss anything?
Well, sadly, when Detroit was one of the worst race riots during World War II, was in Detroit.
Yeah. Yep.
And right in Joe Louis's old neighborhood.
The Black Bottom, yeah. That area, yeah. That was. They're looking to revitalize that because they destroyed that area to put in a freeway, and so they're looking at reconfiguring our freeways downtown. And because the part that there is kind of unnecessary, they feel, and so they want to revitalize and bring back that neighborhood, but something better and different, but kind of with a homage to where it was and what it was when it was great, when it was a great culturally diverse, black and really rich and vibrant neighborhoods. So they're looking to do that. So I hope that comes together. That's be a cool project for our city. And Randy, this is a cool book again. Thank you for being with us.
I appreciate it. Great time.
All right. Thanks a lot. And everybody like, subscribe, leave a comment, all those podcast things and all the podcast places. We do appreciate you joining us, Chris, chiming in. Thank you, Chris, and the other folks connecting with us there. We thank you for being with us. And Detroit City of Champions, DetroitCityofChampions.com. Thanks so much. And we'll see you all again very, very soon.